Hey, Myles here at Tactical Hyve. Welcome to another week of dry fire, and this time we are going to change things up a little bit. We are now going to cover dry fire and live fire on the same day, so we'll give you the plan for the week, and then you can do live fire whenever you want to. I still recommend, if you're following this series, to always do dry fire for at least 3 times before you do live fire. Get into those reps, build some familiarity with what we're covering, then go to the range to validate your live fire. That said, today what we're going to do is we're going to continue talking about the grip. Now we're going to talk about a common question. That's how much grip pressure should you have with both of your hands. We'll dive into a little bit more details, so stay tuned. All right, welcome back. So we're going to address the very common question, particularly among beginners and intermediate shooters, and that is, how much pressure should you apply on your pistol grip with both hands, your support hand and your firing hand? There is really no one answer, right? There are many different takes on this. What I'm going to do today is cover a very common approach, particularly for those who are beginner and intermediate shooters. If you followed this series and you've heard me in other videos, there are layers to this game, just like in almost anything. Layers of understanding, levels of awareness, levels of experience. And what that means is that if I share every technique right off the bat, one, that's going to be overwhelming. Also, on the flip side is if I start off with 1 or 2 techniques, it does not mean there's more to it. Grip is one of those topics where there's lots of ways to grip, and your grip will evolve as you move forward in your shooting journey. So I'm going to talk about grip pressure today based on what a lot of instructors will talk to beginner shooters about, right? And it doesn't mean that's the end all be all. It's just the start, because it's easy to understand. It's easy for beginners to wrap their head around it, and then you can learn more from there, add on, tweak, so on and so forth. All right, so that said, we already talked in the previous 2 weeks about what our firing hand is doing and our support hand, okay? But we didn't talk so much about the pressure, right, in detail. So we're going to do that now. I have my dry fire mag here, and this is going to be important because the whole idea of good grip pressure is it has to be consistent before, during, after your reps. And we want to simulate shooting and simulate movement, because the more movement we have, the more complexity we add, the better the chance we might mess up. And we don't want that, but we want to use that as a test and validation as to whether we have good grip pressure. And I'll dive into that a little bit more later on. So the dry fire mag is something I do recommend. All right, so this is our fundamental take on grip pressure when teaching beginners and even intermediate shooters, but remember, this is not the end all be all. So when you're gripping your pistol grip, you want to squeeze as hard as you can without disturbing the sights, starting off with both hands, okay? So you're going to squeeze really hard, okay? If my red dot or my iron sights are shaking, I'm exaggerating, well, that means it's too hard because now you're shaking. So you now need to let up to the point where your sights are not shaking, okay? That is a starting point. It does not mean that that is exactly the way it's going to be. That is just a starting point. So I squeeze very hard, firmly, and then I let up until things begin to stop shaking. When you found that starting point, there's another thing that we need to address. That is the pressure on your firing hand, okay? If you are squeezing too hard on your firing hand, that can cause 2 things. One is you might have the tendency, when shots are going off, you might have the tendency of shaking your shot because you are now moving your other fingers, and that's going to make your shots go away. Your point of aim will not be your point of impact. Your shots are going to veer off because you have that last minute movement with your 3 fingers here, or they call it the 3 and bingos. The other reason why we need to be careful how much pressure we're putting on with our strong hand, and I discussed this 2 weeks ago when we were talking about the firing hand pressure, or grip pressure, is that you might have trigger freeze, where you might squeeze the trigger, but you might not reset all the way. So I'm going to reset all the way. I'm going to do the proper thing. You're going to hear the click. Okay, that means I'm ready to take another shot. But if you squeeze too hard and you're shooting fast, sometimes you're going to squeeze, break the shot, and then when I think I hit the reset point, I don't. So when I try to take another shot, nothing's going to happen because I did not go all the way to reset my trigger. When I reset my trigger, you'll hear that click. That means I can take another shot. So if you have too hard of a grip with your firing hand, that can happen. Those two things can happen. So going back to grip pressure here, what I'm doing is I'm squeezing really hard with both. And then if my sights are shaking, my iron sights are red dot, I'm going to let up until they don't shake. And now I'm going to do a check on my firing hand. What do I mean by that? So everything is great here. So I let up. Now my sights are steady. Everything's perfect. Everything feels good. Now you need to feel your trigger finger. This is why I recommend the dry fire mag too. So with my grip, I'm going to take multiple shots. And just keep on taking those shots and see if you're getting fatigued very quickly or if it's easy. If you're getting fatigued very quickly and you cannot move your trigger finger quickly, that means you probably are squeezing too tight with your firing hand. So what are you going to do? You are going to release some pressure with your firing hand. You're going to keep clamping down with your support hand, okay? But then just release some pressure with your firing hand to the point where you can articulate your trigger finger, move it quickly so that you can get quick shots off. And then also you're decreasing the chance of shanking the shot with your three amigos. If you move these fingers again, the shot might veer off. Here's something I'm going to add to that, but you can experiment with this. So if you do find yourself letting up with your firing hand, I want you to experiment with now compensating with more pressure with your left hand. Really hold on to this gun, okay, with your support hand. So if you start off here and then you realize like, oh, it's so hard for me to pull this trigger, then let up on the trigger finger, okay? Then try to compensate. This is just experimenting. It's not to say that you need to do it, but now if we're putting numbers to this, if you decreased your firing hand grip by 30%, try to clamp down 30% more with your support hand, just to compensate for the lost tension from your firing hand. It's not to say, again, grip is a very complex fundamental, right? Shooting fundamental of marksmanship. And so this is where you're going to have to experiment. You may not need to do that, all right? And going back to what I said earlier, okay, we are just covering the wave tops here, because if I start going down the rabbit hole, especially for beginners and intermediate shooters, you're not going to understand what I'm saying. Just to give you a little bit of a hint, what I'm talking about later on is that there are schools of thought where you need lots and lots of pressure with this support hand. And I agree, I fall into that category. And this firing hand is very, 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 very little, okay? But I don't want to go into the weeds because it's going to confuse you. So if you're a beginner or intermediate, let's backtrack, squeeze as hard as you can with both, let up until the sights stop shaking, and then if you can't articulate your trigger finger, then decrease some of the pressure. If you want to experiment, the same amount you decreased your pressure on your right hand, putting numbers to this arbitrarily, 30%, then try to clamp down 30% more with your support hand, all right? That's just a start. Now here, with the dry fire session for today, this is where you are going to understand that grip pressure. You're trying to understand what right feels like for you at this very moment in your shooting journey. I'm saying at this very moment because it could change. So if I have this good grip, my sights are not shaking, everything's working perfectly here. You now are going to do your dry fire session, pulling that trigger and seeing if your grip pressure stays the same. Okay, that's extremely important. So if I'm taking 2 shots here, 2 shots there, dry fire, okay? This is why, again, the dry fire mag is going to be good because it's going to allow you to do all of this here. Then, without having to rack and slide, then I'm going to, before I take my shots, I know what my grip pressure feels like. I'm going to monitor throughout my rep whether my grip pressure changes. So I know what it's like before. During my drill, I'm going to monitor, have hyper focus, keep the same amount of pressure, and then at the very end of my shooting, I want to also do a check. So it might be as simple as this. I'm going to do 4 shots total, 2 shots over here, 2 shots over there, and well, I'll face you here, 2 shots here, 2 shots here. So it could be as simple as this, 2 shots here, 2 shots there. I know what my grip pressure is like. I take 2 shots. Then as I move, I'm monitoring my grip pressure to see if it is still the same. It's still the same. Over at the end, I take 2 shots. Okay, and then at the very end, I'm going to also do a check. Do I have good pressure? It's the same. That's a good rep. So the hyper focus here is on the grip pressure. Where you started from, that should be the same thing at the very end, at your last check, before, during, after. Here, what you need to do is make your dry fire reps, whatever you're doing, a little bit more complex, because the more movements that you have, and I alluded to this earlier, the more movements that you have, the chances of you messing up or having inconsistent grip pressure are higher. And We want that challenge so that you are really being hyper-focused on your grip to understand if it begins to wane or you have inconsistent pressure as you're moving. So then you know what to correct or you know what to focus on. So you can do any dry fire drills you want. The holster, whatever you want to. You can add movement, but the whole idea is I want to check my grip pressure before, during, and after. That's your focus. So you already know the dry fire session for this week. Your focus is on grip pressure before, during, after, any type of repetition you want. We are now going to move into the live fire segment, which is going to validate your dry fire for the week. I have a simple target set up, but you can do, just like dry fire, you can do anything you want. Now that we're shooting live fire, this might also amp you up to the point where it's kind of like that complexity we added in dry fire, going to different targets and moving around. It might cause you to forget about your focus, and now you are no longer having good grip pressure. Now with live ammo, with that explosion, that bang, and the excitement, that also might cause you to let up on your grip pressure. So you have to be really focused, just like dry fire. So I'm going to load and make ready. I'm going to start off really simple here, okay? What I'd like you guys to do is you could start off just with, a stationary target, doing 1, 2, 3 shots, but I'm going to talk this through, and I'm going to start off with single shots. So I have my grip here. I'm not even doing this from the draw, just for the beginners who are watching this. As you gain more experience, you can switch it up, but it might start right here, okay? So I have my grip pressure, whatever it was during dry fire. I know what it feels like right now, okay? I have my finger on my trigger because I'm ready to shoot here. What's going to happen is I feel this grip pressure. This is the exact grip pressure that I want. Now, during the shot, as well as at the end, I'm going to do a check. Okay, I'm going to do a mental check during, and then at the end, I'm going to talk it through. So during, I maintained my grip pressure. Now, my last check, I have a prep trigger, just like we talked in the series, ready to take another shot. Finger is off, and I feel good. It is the same grip pressure that I started with, so that would be a good rep, okay? Now, as you do that a few times, just to make sure that you're consistent, then you can graduate to 2 shots. So I might do 2 shots. I'm going to start off slow here, okay? So you don't need to speed up. So it might be 2 shots. I know what my grip pressure is like. Back on safe, before, during, after, the grip pressure was identical. So I'm happy. This means I can move on to the next level. So if you're doing 2 shots, then you might want to take 2 shots faster instead of doing anything more complex than that. Just take 2 shots on the same target. So the same thing, as you're taking 2 shots, now you're going to remember or really pay attention before, during, after. Do you have the same grip pressure? If not, then you might need to slow down. You might need to go back to a single shot, and you need to be consistent. As you get better and you feel confident, then you might do 3 shots. Okay, and you can speed it up. So that was probably a 1/4 second cadence. Then you can go faster than that, faster, faster, faster. When you get to maybe 6 shots and your grip pressure has not changed, now it'll make things more complex, adding more targets, moving around. But your practice session or your training session might be focused just on grip pressure. So every time you're doing the drill, maybe the drill is I'm moving into this position, then I have to take 2 shots. Before, during, after, I was paying attention to my grip. Everything looks great. Okay, finger up. That's how I'm doing my check. When practicing and training, it's always best to go in with a focus. So if it is grip pressure, do anything you want, but your focus should be on target right now. Okay, if you do everything right, you follow the process, your hits should be good. But to really help and ensure that you have good fundamentals, this is why we need a hyper focus. So you can do anything you want from the draw, different size targets, distances, but the hyper focus of the training session for this week at least should be your grip pressure. Remember, one more time, I'm going to talk this through, okay? So I might start with single shots. Okay, I know what my grip pressure, my ideal grip pressure feels like. Everything's good. I'll take my single shot. I'm going to monitor what happened during. During, everything looked good. After, it's the same. Great, okay? Finger off the trigger, stop. If you run into this situation now, okay, so I'm going to do this. I have my grip pressure, everything looks good. I'm going to break the shot, but now my grip pressure is completely off. You need to be aware of that and adjust, okay? Then hyper focus on the next rep, really clamp down wherever you need to clamp down, and that's how you approach this. Then add layers of complexity. So that's all you really need to do for your live fire. The dry fire that we did earlier in the week, or you should be doing earlier in the week, is going to be exactly the same as your live fire. Your live fire session, you can make as complex as you want. And the whole idea is your hyper focus needs to be on your grip pressure. The more complex you think you make things, then that will likely affect your grip pressure, and you need to pay attention to that. So that wraps up this week's dry fire and live fire session. Remember, this is what we're going to do now. Live fire, dry fire, combine it. I still recommend at least 3 dry fire sessions before you do live fire, and that will set you up for success when you're doing live fire. Hope you guys liked the video. As always, if you did like it, please give us a thumbs up. Let us know what you think down below, if this series is helping you, if there's something else that you want us to cover. And as always, if you haven't subscribed, make sure to hit that subscribe button. See you guys next week.